One. Welcome back, everybody, to Hoops HD's continuing 2022-2023 preseason coverage. This is our ACC preseason preview. If you're looking for another conference, check out the season preview tab up there. If it's not up there yet, it's coming soon. We're going to be doing, over the next couple of weeks here, tons and tons of podcasts that we're recording. Just for information's sake, we are recording this the evening of Monday, October 17th. So if there's big news out of one of these leagues, or out of the ACC of one of these teams the next few days or next week or so. We apologize for not getting it, but we can't see into the future very well.
Not very well.
I'm your host, Chad Sherwood. To my sides, David Griggs and John Teitel. John Sleeker right below me. Rocco Miller from Bracketeer.org. Joey Fortson to his side. And this is the ACC. And Mr. Teitel, I'm going to start off with you in the ACC and start off with our national runner-up, who, as you've told us for years, first-year coaches are no good and they can't do anything. And that was clearly proven by Hubert Davis last year at North Carolina, correct?
He gets a lot of credit, and as much as I dislike him, he proved me wrong. So kudos to him. The big factor, I think, for their preseason #1 in the nation ranking this year is the fact that they bring back all of those guys from the championship runner-up team, including Armando Bacot. 31 double-doubles last year, tied David Robinson's NCAA single-season record. He broke the school record with 511 rebounds. One of two Carolina players in the last 50 years who's averaged a double-double for his career. Not sure how he's going to do in the pros, but he is the man in college basketball.
Yeah, Rocco, it's hard for me to look at any team in the nation and say, I don't really like preseason polls. They really don't mean much, but I think it's dead right. I mean, how can you not have North Carolina #1?
Well, I mean, if you're as in love with Houston as I am, you can have them #2.
Oh, all right.
But we'll save that for
the American. Well, we're going to be doing the American in 3 weeks from now. We're talking about band conferences. Come on.
Yeah.
Don't forget I even said that. No, I mean, North Carolina deserves the love. Everything John said about Bacot. I mean, if you've seen watching him in the tournament last year, even compared to Hunter Dickinson, there's so many good big men back in college basketball from last year, which is awesome with Sheway and Timmy, and the list goes on and on. Sonogo, we just talked about. So Bacot is, I think, maybe the cream of the crop. He can do everything well, and clearly carried the team. They were a benefactor of some upsets, getting St. Peter's in the Elite Eight, but they took out Baylor in that ridiculous second-round game. I'll never forget that, blowing a 27-point lead, then still beating them in overtime when everybody thought they were dead. I think that changed everything. I got to cover Duke at the Sweet 16 Elite Eight. The fact that they beat Duke when they were that hot, regardless of all the other hoopla behind Coach K and all that stuff, I thought Duke was winning the title after what I saw in San Francisco, and this Carolina team took them out for the third time. And so anyway, the whole hype and all of that is warranted. I just think, they didn't have the cleanest regular season by any means. In fact, into February last year, we weren't even sure they had a resume.
They didn't.
So, we'll have to see how it plays out. I think they'll have a little bit better success throughout the year. And shouldn't have that kind of trouble again. And how about Pete Nance, a guy that was stuck at Northwestern for 4 years, now gets to be a part of this amazing team. What a great situation for him.
Well, here's the thing, Rocco. They did have a resume last year. The problem was up until the regular season finale at Duke, the highlight or low light of the resume was a loss at home against the Pitt Panthers.
Right. I think they were winless against teams in the field up until the end of February.
Yeah, they had a complete blank in the top two tiers most of the season until we got to the last weeks there and the ACC tournament.
Yeah, I just wanted to defend Teitel a little bit. He was proven very much right until March 5th when they won at Duke.
Joey, let me see. You're an ACC guy here. What are your thoughts on this Carolina team? Are they deservedly #1?
I do. Well, given when people put together their starting five, I think even with the loss of Brady Manick, and that's a big loss. People don't realize how important his shot making with his height was. Let's see if Nance can kind of slide into that role. They still don't have depth. Yes, they brought in a recruiting class, but they still don't have depth, in my opinion. That will not, as proven last year, you can do well. St. Peter's did well with not necessarily a ton of depth, and they did well as well. In the tournament, I don't think this North Carolina team is going to win the regular season title in the ACC.
I'm going to
really don't.
highlight
I
one
think they will
game.
lose. They're going to have a loss to a Pitt again. They're going to have a loss to.
Wow.
It's going to happen.
Well,
And
not
so
to
I think
pick.
we look
No,
elsewhere.
yeah.
Joby, just go back
nobody
to the
loses to
Baylor
Pitt.
game if you want to make your point about Brady Manick. When he had that flagrant foul, that's when Baylor made their big comeback, and it looked like it was
Exactly
going to
right.
be
That's exactly right,
Carolina
John.
meltdown.
But we've talked about obviously Baycott, but having Love and Baycott, I love teams that have to use the pun, teams that have both inside and outside components. This that's the sort of team that goes in March. North Carolina could win it all very easily, or make a similar run to what they did last year. I don't think it's out of the question at all, and they are very deserving of a high ranking. I just think their overall win-loss record in the regular season will be disappointing from a preseason number one perspective.
Well, Griggs, the other team that is in the top 10 in the preseason polls here, despite Coach K being gone, the Duke Blue Devils were ranked number 7. And when I look at Duke, I see the same thing, the same type of roster turnaround and incredible talent coming in that happened under Coach K. Nothing has changed except for the name of the guy's name at the top.
Right. And that's a big thing to have change. Can he develop talent? Can he get him to mesh? Can he get a bunch of players that are very talented, but get them to be cohesive? I think that's much harder to do than what people realize. Everybody thinks that
Right.
Coach K and, John Calipari at Kentucky, it's just a matter of just bringing the guys in and then it's easy, and it's not. But I still think that the culture still exists there. He wasn't just picked on a whim. Duke has to prove to me that they don't belong this high before I decide that they don't belong this high. And to get big rivalry with North Carolina, a couple of facts here, just 8 miles apart, Chad, and they've never met in the NCAA tournament.
Wrong.
What they
Yeah. But Tytel, we do have a first-year coach, and he's coming in with Lively and Whitehead and Filipowski, all these big-name freshman studs. But it is a first-year coach now. Maybe your first-year coach rule does apply with Duke?
I don't know, because he's not like a guy coming in like Neptune from another school. Not that Neptune doesn't have Villanova roots, because he does, but Shire's been playing and working for Krzyzewski for literally a couple of decades. He knows the system as good as anybody. I'm curious to see if he just tries to do the Krzyzewski thing because it works, or does his own thing. And as a recruiter, he's proven himself as good as anybody in the country because his classes are loaded. Nervous though, he's still got to prove himself going across the country to the Phil Knight legacy. We'll see what they do. They got to play Kansas. They got to play the Buckeyes. They got to play Iowa. The schedule's pretty freaking tough, especially in non-conference play early on. But I agree, much like what Rocco was saying about Villanova for the Big East. By the time March comes around, I think all these young guys will all be on the same page.
All right. Joby, one other ACC team made the top 25 preseason, and that is your Hoos, who were not quite in the NCAA tournament last year. And while they have everybody back, can they shoot the ball?
Yeah, well, that's the key if you remember the last time they were in the NCAA tournament, one of the reasons they were knocked out in the first round is because the Ohio Bobcats shot the ball extremely well, specifically this young man who was named after Coach Bennett, Ben Vanderplas. He'll now be wearing a Virginia uniform this year. And so they'll have that component. But if you're looking at, they might have the best shooter in this entire freshman class in Isaac Manili. They bring in this Isaac squared component with Isaac Trout. It's just insane by all accounts. They beat out Gonzaga for him. And 6'10" guy can shoot, that typical Gonzaga, Virginia mold that you can kind of start to see combined. And then, they bring back everybody. I mean, Kie Clark can regale them stories about how he threw lobs to Ralph Sampson, and he's been there so long.
Kie Clark, wait, he graduated 10 years ago, I thought. Come on.
So, but Reese Beekman, it will be Reese Beekman's team. And Reese Beekman, he's actually probably going to be the first point guard in a lot of ways. And I think he's ready to take on that mantle. The key is maybe not, you're exactly right. The shooting it was remarkable. Virginia would beat Duke going 1 for 20 from the 3-point line. Yeah, that sort of thing. That's not going to happen. They're going to make threes this year with what I described. The issue is they fell in KenPom's defensive ratings. You're talking about St. Peter's being 28, fell to, I think, 59th in KenPom. That's unheard of in a Tony Bennett system. If they get, because they have another year of Gardner, and Franklin and these other guys who transferred in last year, if they learn the defense and can apply it like they did late in the year, then I think Virginia has a real shot of being that team that when I was talking about North Carolina might not be able to have the depth to handle it. Well, Virginia's got the depth now. And so we're going to see if they might be the team that could do a lot of regular season damage like they always seem to do. Hell, even last year they were 12-8.
Well, Rocco, do you agree with him about Virginia, or what are your thoughts on the Cavaliers?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of solid because we know what we're getting out of almost every one of these players that are going to be dependent on. I just don't know if any of the 4 freshmen coming in will actually crack the rotation or not. That'll be interesting to follow. I love Ben Vanderplas. He was one of the ultimate glue guys in the MAC or all over mid-major basketball, under the radar basketball, I should say. And I think on Jaden Gardner's front, he took the step up from East Carolina last year from a statistical standpoint, but I do think they lose a little bit defensively with him. So that's always going to be a work in progress, I think, for him specifically. So the hard part I have with Virginia is it's so many older guys, unless the rotation shifts with some younger guys, that you kind of know what you're going to get, and there's limited upside. I think they're safely a tournament team, but I don't know if they're going to crack like the first or second tier with the same nucleus of guys, including Vanderplas.
Stalika, how about Jim Laranaga's team,
Yeah.
which was in the Elite Eight
How about
last year, and I'm a little bit high on this team.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've liked to talk about in terms of Miami during the offseason was Nigel Pack, who ended up transferring from Kansas State, mainly for NIL reasons. But you also have guys like Isaiah Wong and Jordan Miller who are going to be returning from Miami. I'm sorry, but Charlie Moore couldn't get, I guess, his 6th or 7th year of eligibility to come back for one more year. I don't know that they make an Elite Eight run again, but they should make the NCAA tournament once again. Now, early in the season, they'll get a bit of a test in I think it's the Hall of Fame Tip-Off Classic against Providence in either Maryland or St. Louis. But outside of that, their only other non-conference test before they get into the ACC is going to be against Rutgers.
Is Miami kind of a team that people just have a tendency to ignore, maybe because they don't have the basketball brand name, or that like this is a team that went to the Elite Eight, that has a few good pieces back, and that added quite a bit. Like, this is a good Miami team.
Yeah, I agree with you, David. I think Wong and Pack are special. Jordan Miller had a great year last year, and then you bring in one of the best bigs, from under the radar, Norchad Omie. Everybody wanted him. The question is, when he played bigger teams at Arkansas State, he had his worst performances, but with a much better team around him, he'll get a lot more looks at Miami than he did at Arkansas State. So I don't think that will sustain itself. He's an unbelievable talent. And so, I do agree that the upside on Miami is pretty great. Nigel Pack's only a sophomore, let's not forget. So is Omie. And so these guys can take another leap forward in their development realistically.
Yeah.
Tytel, how about the other team from the state of Florida, Leonard Hamilton's Seminoles, who had a disappointing year last year, did not make the tournament, but I think that's a team that could be back there this year. Do you?
It's a good question. I'll go with maybe, because I don't think it's as solid as you might think. Leonard Hamilton has gotten a lot of NBA first-round picks over the past several years. So while he's good at bringing in talent, he's not so good at holding on to it. Matthew Cleveland is one of the guys he has held on to the third straight Seminole rookie to win ACC Sixth Man of the Year. Scored 11 a game as a freshman, double figures in each of his last 9. I won't ask Joby if he made a long buzzer beater in Charlottesville to stun the Cavaliers. The sad thing is that he really needs to work on his shooting, frankly. He's a great athlete. He can score, but 18% from behind the arc and 56% from the free throw line, that's not tournament numbers, is it?
Joby, your thoughts on? Did you want to respond or no?
Yes, he can at least make a shot from behind the arc. We know that, unfortunately. Maybe he needs 2 lines behind the arc and it'll be more accurate. Because that was the game that pretty much knocked Virginia out into a must-win situation. So I know it quite well. Hamilton seems to always come with these guys who are long, athletic, defense, and so you have Mills who can also contribute on this team as well. I don't think this, when you're talking Miami, you're talking Virginia, those are the teams can challenge Duke and North Carolina. I don't think Florida State, which often is that team that challenges Duke and North Carolina, I don't think this is that year for it. I think they could make the tournament. The ACC is much stronger than it was last year. It almost couldn't be worse in a lot of ways. That's why North Carolina didn't have a win, top 200 wins, because ACC couldn't provide him one. But the Florida State, I'm not sold that. I think they're at the bottom of this pack, and there are teams that we have not yet talked about that I would actually have ahead.
Well, let me go to one of these other teams possibly here, Stalika. How about Mike Young's Hokies?
Well, to put it one thing in perspective from last year, Virginia Tech ended up winning the conference tournament for the first time since 1979. That was 3 conferences ago back in the Metro Athletic. And keep in mind back then their competition was Louisville, Memphis, Florida State, South Carolina. Cincinnati was in the conference, but they were down at the time. Now, unfortunately for the Hokies, they're not going to have many starters returning from last year's team. They'll still have Hunter Couture, Justin Mutz, and I think Sean Padula. But other than that, they're going to also be relying on some other transfers to the portal. And we'll have to see how Mike Young's recruits do in his system this year. Will they make the NCAA tournament again? Maybe, but I wouldn't go against Young.
Yeah, Griggs, I know you're a bit of a fan of his too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good answer. Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Yeah. He had great years at Wofford, and I agree with Stalik. Like, I think if they win the conference tournament, they will be back in the NCAAs.
Okay, Rocco. When we talk about this group here, I think we're kind of into the bubble-ish or bottom of the at-large bids, into the bubble here. And another team that I personally am kind of intrigued by is Kevin Keats' NC State team with Terkavian Smith there. I mean, he's a great player, but is there enough to get them into the tournament?
Well, there could be. It's kind of like a sink or swim situation with Keats also sitting on the hot seat, I would like to say. Mm-hmm. Terkavian's an amazing talent. They also got one of our favorite Big South players in DJ Burns. And Jarkel Joyner's there. They've got some pieces. I'm not a huge Dusan fan. I saw him play a lot at Utah and Illinois State. I don't think, he's usually much of a net positive player. So I just think some of the pieces they're counting on, it's just limited. A lot of redshirt seniors, 5th-year guys on this team. I'm not seeing them in the tournament, to be honest. But with a talent like Terkavian, he could put them on their back theoretically. I just think as soon as a couple things go wrong for NC State, and given the hot seat situation, it could really tumble fast there.
All right. Well, the Joby, I actually missed this team. I was going down my list. I think we got to cycle back to them, and I think I know which team you do like it, and that team that wasn't a big dance.
I really like the Irish. I mean, I think they're returning 3 of their top 5 scorers. They got one of the top recruits in the country coming in to bolster it with Starling. This team, they squeaked into the tournament last year, but they proved their worth of where they belong. That is the team. I mean, they were 15-5 in conference. I know the conference is down, but 15-5 shows consistency. And then you produce in the NCAA tournament on top of that. I think that's a launching pad for really good things. This team is going to not be holding their breath whether they're going to be in or out come March. They're going to be solidly in the field. They are going to make a lot of noise and a much stronger ACC this year. And they're going to be one of the reasons why the ACC is better this year, because a team like them, will be actually winning games out of conference. The Irish, you got to watch out for them. I think they could climb as high as 5th and maybe higher if Miami or Virginia stumble.
Yeah.
Another thing about Notre Dame is this is more of an intangible thing. They have 6 players that are grad students. And I know the reason that might be important is because when you have grad students, especially that many, they tend to bring a little bit of level-headedness. When you get into a rut or when other players are going down, they tend to kind of bring them out of it. It's kind of an intangible thing, but that level of maturity could end up really helping them too.
Titel, I'll go to you to talk about another first-year coach. I know you love these guys here. And it has been a bit of a nightmare coaching situation in Louisville the last few years. Is Kenny Payne the guy who's going to get things turned around for this program here?
I don't know what you mean by a bit of a nightmare. It's been a nightmare. I mean, you bring in Kenny Payne. On paper, he's got some nice credentials. He's won a championship as a player at Louisville back in '86. So you've got the hometown love for that. He's not just a first-time coach, like new coach, first-year coach. He's a first-time head coach at any level of basketball. It's not like he was at like Neptune. He was head coach at Fordham to get his feet wet. He's never been a head coach. So that makes me even more nervous. And it's one thing to try to replace Chris Mack after that whole nightmare, as you excellently put it, but just the numbers and the expectations, they have a 22,000 seat arena. Last year, it was about half full most of the year. And I believe they only have 10 scholarship players because of the nightmare. Does that seem like a recipe for winning success? I don't think so.
I kind of got to echo that. Like, what is Louisville's value as a program right now? Only 13 wins a year ago, only 13 the year before. I would have thought that Louisville was a really, top-notch elite blue blood caliber program. And I know Kenny Payne has ties there. He's certainly revered for what he did and how good they were in the 80s. Sometimes I think Louisville is still chasing that, not realizing that going to 4 Final Fours in 6 years is sort of the exception, not the norm. Louisville hired a head coach that has never been a head coach. Is that, where are they now?
Rocco, you got thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this year he's kind of got a free year, couple upside guys. I think the recruiting's already going well for the 23-24 campaign. And so I feel like he's going to get somewhat of a free pass just because of where they're starting. It's unfortunate he's going to one of the most brutal Maui Invitational fields. They could easily go 0-3 there.
Yeah.
But in general, I think you'll start to see some incremental progress towards the end of the year. You've got multiple hot seat situations at places like Pitt and NC State this year. So I think Louisville can rise up to, nothing respectable for their standards, but maybe like 11th or 10th in the league, and then really build with a strong roster next year and get back to kind of in that tournament picture, what we're used to. I think it's just a 2-year project.
Well, I have a team that I don't think is going to be on the bubble, but I think, Salika, you've got thoughts and maybe you disagree with me on them. How about the Demon Deacons?
Well, Wake Forest did kind of come out of nowhere last year under Steve Forbes in his first year. They were a pretty good defensive team, but unfortunately, they were also padding their numbers against a very Krispy Kreme-like schedule in honor of the Donut Bakery based in North Carolina. This year, when I look at their schedule, they did upgrade a little bit, but not by much. They do have games against Georgia. They get a game at Wisconsin as part of the ACC Big Ten Challenge. They get a neutral court game against LSU, but the Tigers are a completely different team than last year. And My favorite game of all, they go to the JMA to play at Rutgers.
The rack. Yeah, Joe, I think you had a comment on it all too.
Yeah,
right?
Wake, I really like what Forbes is doing here because Wake is not an easy place. Appleby coming in from Florida should help, but they losing Williams is a key. Are they turning into transfer in
What happened to
leave,
Williamson?
transfer in leave sort of situation? So, that's my worry. Yeah,
You're talking about Williams, not Williamson. Williamson's there this year.
yeah, Williams.
Williams.
Oh, you're talking about, Londo. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Londo
who
Williams.
was,
Yeah.
I think he was leading scorer last year. But
Oh, yeah,
Witt's
he's
a
big
good.
time.
Yeah.
Witt's a good point guard. Yeah, he's not elite, but he can make the trains run on time. I think he runs Forbes' system well. And Stalika's exactly right. All right, so this drives me nuts when your scheduling hurts you, and you're unable to do it. Let's go out and schedule the worst of two worlds. What you do not want to do to trick the schedulers is schedule both. You don't want to schedule teams that finish at the bottom of their conferences. So you go out and get Georgia, bottom of their conference. You go out for the big guys. Then, let's go to LaSalle, who I don't think is going to be very good this year. South Carolina State, Hampton is now going to be swamped in their new conference. I mean, it's just insane. Someone needs to grab these guys and you need to figure out how to schedule. And the only reason they have Wisconsin, I'll give the Rutgers. Rutgers is a good game. But the only reason they have Wisconsin, who is borderline tournament, is because of the Big Ten ACC challenge. So,
Joe, you don't need to crap on LaSalle. I think they can finish fifth in their mythical Big Five conference.
That's a tournament that involves LaSalle, Georgetown, and Loyola Marymount. It wasn't worth mentioning.
All right. Let's move on here. Rocco, Jim Boeheim's orange. Jim Boeheim going for his 8th consecutive double-digit loss season. Some coaches will be on a hot seat for something like that. But what about Syracuse this year? Are they going to just somehow be on the bubble at the end of the season, like almost every year they end up?
Yeah, I mean, now that the Boeheim boys are out of the way, although Buddy was a lot of fun and put the team on the back a couple of years ago, I think that actually helps because it's less conflict for Jim himself to deal with, and then it also, Joe Girard's a special shooter. He shot over 40% last year, even though he guns it from everywhere. He'll shoot from almost half court, and now he'll just be the primary sniper, right? And then you can focus a little bit more on the inside-out game versus just having a bevy of guard play, which is what last year was all about. I think you've got a big mix of freshmen. They're excited about Chris Bunch. Malik Brown's nice. You might get something from Copeland and Carey on the freshman class. Obviously, that's more for the future, but I'm not even talking about Mintz and Taylor, who are projected starters. So it's a young team, but he can really kind of recreate the wheel with a bunch of these pieces, and anchored with Girard's sniper ability and Jesse Edwards down low, who we know we're going to get solid production from. So it's interesting. Yeah, they're very good chance if they kind of hit their stride at the right point, they'll be able to get back in the bubble picture like we're used to. But it's really difficult to just say, hey, these 6 freshmen and a couple seniors are going to be able to do it. So for now, they're not a tournament team, but I think they can play their way in there if everything clicks. Let's just say.
Titel, there's 4 teams we have not yet discussed: Pitt, BC, Clemson, and Georgia Tech. Any of them you want to discuss?
I want to discuss a player on Pitt, not the whole
Okay.
team, because they don't deserve it. But 265-pound John Hughley IV, honorable mention all conference last year, and he did that despite drawing double and triple teams because who on that team is making shots from the perimeter? 7th in the nation, over 200 free throws attempted per game. He gets the ball down low. He gets fouled. He scores. He's probably going to get triple teamed again, but he's a great, great player.
Yeah. Is this going to be Cable's last season if they don't find a way to contend for a bid?
Thought it would be last year, so what do I know?
All right. Griggs, Boston College. Maybe, is this your possible team on the rise?
Well, they return for start, maybe on the rise, but certainly not.
Come on. I want to hear you do it. I want to start the BC bandwagon. Come on.
Okay, go ahead. Start.
Joby, will
I
you
was
be
gonna-
with me on this?
Yeah.
I actually think they're the top of that bottom of the dregs.
That's
I'm
something.
a little
I mean,
surprised.
I think Ashton Langford's a really good player along with the other three starters that they had 6 wins last year in conference. I think with a 20 game schedule, mind you, they might actually make it to 7 or so because you do get to play. Oh, that awful Pitt team, that Georgia Tech's, sorry, Passner's, the blooms off the rose there. Louisville's just a train wreck. There's some really bad at the bottom that I think BC, with more consistent play, as long as Grant can establish that as a new coach, I think they could actually take advantage of that bottom and then maybe pick off a game or two, one of those games where, they beat Virginia 50-49, or they get lucky. They seem to always beat Duke and Cameron for some reason. I don't understand that, but they do. And that equals like 7 wins.
What about Clemson? I
well,
thought Clemson would have been the best out of this group. They won. What was it? 16, 17 games a year ago.
Yeah, well, Rocco, where do we stand at PJ Hall's health when we talk
Hall,
Clemson? Yeah, he's not healthy, is he?
Oh, he's not healthy. Never
Yeah,
mind.
he's gonna miss some time. I don't have the exact time, but he'll be missing some time.
Yeah.
Oh well, never mind.
Without Hall, who was hit by injuries last year, also, I just don't see anything from this Clemson team.
We got to go back and erase that. What I said.
No, they actually got Brevin Galloway over from BC, who was Earl Grant's guy. Came from Charleston with him, and so that's an interesting development. But I don't think he's a needle mover at the ACC level. You also have these 3 freshmen. I think that's where we have some mystery with Dylan Hunter, RJ Godfrey, and Chauncey Wiggins, and Joshua Beadle's technically a freshman too, redshirted last year. I think with the projected starting 5. I don't see it as a tournament team, but if some of these freshmen emerge, that's where something could change.
All right. Slika, real quick. Georgia Tech is in this conference. Any thoughts?
Is Josh Pastner still coaching there?
Technically, yes. It's kind of he's calling it a rebuild year. I don't know why, whatever that means.
I got nothing.
You got nothing. I don't know that there's worth much of anything at this point. So on that note, though, I want to run through each of you with 3 questions this time. Number 1, who your regular season champ is. Number 2, how many bids from the league. And number 3, any other final thoughts you have on the ACC. Slika, let me go ahead and start with you.
I'm going to go ahead and say Duke is probably going to find a way to win the conference right here. As far as the regular season, tournament would be a complete crapshoot. As far as, I'll intertwine this with my final thought here. I'm going to say they'll probably end up getting 6 or 7 teams in the NCAA tournament. But Jim Boeheim had also come out a couple days ago saying, even though the ACC didn't get a lot of teams in the tournament last year, they did get a lot of mileage out of it. And that's basically, you're looking at
They got a lot of teams in the Final Four, that's for certain.
Yeah, they did.
I'm guessing he is not a fan of the Mountain West here.
Rocco, your thoughts?
Yeah, I do think North Carolina is in position, of course, to be the regular season champion and the pick. It's just too much to put Duke in front of them. I do think they're clearly the top 2. But I do think, as I think Tytel mentioned earlier, much like Villanova, later in the year, I do think Duke's going to be pretty strong and has a very good chance to win the ACC tournament, as long as they're motivated to do so. And I'll say 7 teams in. It's kind of, I only think 5 are mostly safe, and that would be Carolina, Duke, Florida State, Virginia, and Miami. And I do just barely have both Virginia Tech and Wake Forest getting in. It's close because Notre Dame's right on the outside looking in for me. And, if Syracuse does something, they would be the next team in line. But it's hard to see 7 getting in after last year. But if these teams can hit their peak, I think that's the right number.
Rocco, basically for the second straight conference, I almost completely agree with you. I did so in the Big East when we did that show. I do agree with you on your Carolina pick. I do agree with you on the 7 bids. My only change is I do have Notre Dame and Wake Forest out. But other than that, I'm with you there. Tytel, what about you?
I have the North Carolina Tar Heels winning the regular season title. I have an over under of 7, and I'm taking the under. I think Duke, Carolina, Virginia are slam dunks. I think Florida State squeezes in, but I'm not sure. They went 17-14 last year. I think Vodtech makes it. I think Miami makes it just because there's so much NIL money there, although it hasn't helped the football team that much. And although Joby loves the Irish, like they lost Paul Atkinson and Blake Wesley. So unless JJ Starling is a lottery pick, which he might be, I have some question marks there. As far as a final thought, for those of you who haven't followed Justin Mutz of Vodtech, he's really an amazing human being and student athlete. He thought about going pro, but he took the COVID year. He led the team in assists last year, despite being 6'7", 232. And like, he's going for his second, he's already got, his second master's degree. He's amazing. The coaches can't say enough nice things about him because he deserves all the nice things they say about him.
All right. Joby.
Yeah. I'll be the homer. I called it in pre-season. I actually think this Virginia team is well suited for the regular season to be the regular season champ.
I could see that.
And they just always it just a consistent. A lot of people are going to have to go to the dentist's office, as Roy Williams always said. I'll choose 7, but I could see 6. The key, and this is my final thought, is last year the big issue the ACC had is besides Duke, no one else did anything outside of the conference. I mean that you didn't get those wins. So when you don't get those wins out of conference, North Carolina, if you remember, played really good games. They beat Michigan, but they played really good games, but they didn't get the wins. And so if you don't get those wins, that hurts. Virginia beats North Carolina or Florida State beats North Carolina. You don't. It's not as impressive. And it's a domino effect. Watch the ACC this year. If they do the same slow out of the gate, as opposed to, as Boeheim pointed out, every team but Virginia Tech, who didn't get in that large, advanced 2 spots beyond their projected seed point. If it doesn't matter, Jim Boeheim, if you only have 4/5 teams in because you had such a bad preseason, pre-regular conference season matters. It matters dramatically. And the ACC felt it throughout the entire year. And those teams, which were better, they were better than where they were seated. But I don't blame the committee. The committee can only go what you have in front of you. And, and the ACC didn't provide it. So this year, let's see if the ACC turns it around.
Yeah, we had a chance earlier today, Titel, Griggs, and I, to have a chat. It's up there on the website with the Chris Reynolds, who was the committee chair. And I think one of the first comments he had was, "Hey, when games start counting? November 7th, when we start playing. They count just as much then. So win those games and play good teams during those games." But Griggs, why don't you finish us off here?
I'm going to go with North Carolina to win it. I was very, very critical of North Carolina until March 5th, all last season. I am a believer.
I thought it was until April 1st.
It may have been, but when they went on the run that they went on, and they bring that many pieces back, and they add what they added, how are you not on board with that? I think Duke is another protected seed. That is a great rivalry, 8 miles apart, and have never met in the NCAA tournament. And it's just. I agree with Virginia. I'm not picking them, but I don't think it's a bad pick. Joby is a homer, but in this case, he might actually be correct. I really think the Hoos are protected seed caliber good this year. Another team I really like to get into the top half of the bracket, be wearing white, maybe 5-6 line, maybe better, the Canes. I think they're fantastic. I don't know why people aren't bigger on them. And I kind of like this Irish team a lot. So while I think that it's 6, the 6 that I'm picking, I could see all of them in the top half of the bracket, meaning wearing white 8 seed or better. And then after that, I think it's a bit of a drop off.
Okay. Well, I guess on that note, I do want to thank everybody for joining us for our ACC preview show. Want to check out any other conferences? Check out the season preview tab up top there. We'll be recording next week I think at least 4, maybe 10 more conferences, maybe 30 more conferences. I'm not that certain. But on behalf of John Titel, Rocco Miller from Bracketeer.org up here, you guys were in different spots when we started the show. Joey Forts is now down below me. David Griggs and John Sleekin to his sides. I'm Chad Sherwood. Thanks for joining us. Talk to you again real soon.